could have kept these. Hi, hello, and welcome to Real Court. Oh, it's too late now. Um, yeah, hi, hello, welcome. So, I bought some Pokemon cards at a gas station. Like, this is the packaging. I was like, wait. So, we're just gonna see what's at. Now, the thing about Pokemon is usually there's a battle, right? And there's 10 cards. And I could do like 5v 5v5, but if I do 5v5, not every single card is necessarily like a Pokemon. But the bottom of the deck that I can see, I'm gonna pull from the top, so we're gonna know what the bottom is. Well, I guess I can pull the card from the bottom and then go from there. It's Shellos, right? And Shello, I don't know. Need there be introduction? Hi, hello, welcome to Real Group. My name is Patrick, and this is one of those we'll see type videos. I was gonna go live earlier, but I've just been like kind of tired today. In life, life is full of twists and turns and unexpected events, and I guess see, I was sent. It's fine. So yeah, I guess so. It's interesting how I guess it's always been interesting how I will like ponder certain things or something will like come to my mind to maybe that's I don't know what my quote unquote obsession is with language or like I'll take the bottom card. Ooh, okay. I did not know. I'm already surprised. So, although I saw it was Shellos, I did not see that it's like a reverse foil or whatever. It's like holographic, girl. I had no clue. What? You think these just because I'm gas station, not the standard typical officially licensed packaging that you're used to? Oh, let me stop. Um, as you can tell, it's going to be another jiggly one. Sorry. What was I talking about? Life. Oh, there have been times where something like will come to mind, right? And I'll think about it, I'll ponder it, I'll reach a conclusion within myself, right? And I guess I kind of been thinking about this sort of recently, not all the time, because I think uh, one of the great things about language is that when like it helps us convey ideas and relate to each other, right? And so sometimes, because of my experiences and what I assume, and it's on me for making assumptions, what I assume about other experiences because of the language that they use to convey their experience, I'll be like, does that fit? Like, is what I'm understanding about someone else's experience sort of represented by this word? Like, does that apply to my experience? And, excuse me, this isn't necessarily the point, but it'll be like, maybe not really. So that's why, like last time, and every now and then I think about it, like, because like maybe I'll be like talking to somebody or like watching a video or whatever, And someone will be like, "Well, I just like channeled that," or like I'm channeling, or I channeled this. And not everyone is a channel, right? And I guess it's like part of that, like, do I channel? Like, is this channeling? And then to me, and again, like, I feel like there's not much different, like, internally, spiritually, there's not much different to me, like, post the beginning of my journey to like pre the beginning of my journey. You know what I mean? And so that's when I'll be like, oh, maybe not. But I think for me, also, I think it's different for different people because a lot of times for me, what will happen is like, and what I assume to be like a download or in download format, it'll be like a question. I feel like for me, a lot of the conversations are like questions that prompt thinking, and then it's almost like an internal dialogue, right? It is an internal dialogue of like, okay, yeah, da 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 da, and then maybe it'll be like, not quite this. So anyway, I've been, as you can tell through these past few lives, pondering a lot lately, and I've been asking myself some questions that I don't really have answers to. And a lot of them are experience based, right? So it's like, I can think about and ponder these things all day long, but until presented with an opportunity or until the experience becomes my reality, then there's a benefit, I guess, of if there are any like hangups or challenges or mental blocks that I have that would prevent me from experiencing something, it allows me the opportunity to sort of work through that before something presents itself. But otherwise, it's like, I could ponder, think about, consider certain things all day long. And if it never happens, then kind of sort of what's the point? So, anyway, there was, I don't even, I feel like astrologically, because again, I don't follow transits myself anymore. I feel like it's not until something starts popping up in thumbnails and stuff like that that is brought to my awareness. Like, I'm pretty sure there's a new moon Libra happening at some point. Excuse me. Well, it shouldn't be today because I've been. The moon is in Virgo right now. The sun. Oh, it's gonna be. Oh yeah, yeah. They are gonna be late. It's gonna be a late new moon Libra. Interesting. I'm like trying to think of my own chart. Loki. That'd be what in conjuncting Saturn, late Libra. Anyway, it's like so there was this like thought that not necessarily a thought. There was a conversation. I guess it's interesting. It's been an interesting like week or so. Of on one hand, it's the whole like nature thing. On another hand, it's like life. It's like every arena and aspect of my life has had some kind of conversation around it. And a part of that, and one of the things that I feel like I've noticed on my journey for a while is that it's important when certain questions come up, certain feelings come up, or certain ideologies, but not in a theocratic way necessarily or spiritual way. Ideologies just in terms of like the way that I see the world or what like typical frameworks that I tend to follow, conclusions that I've reached, and so on and so forth. There are a few where it's like there'd be like a personal truth that I have, but when I was in a different phase of life, that truth manifested in a way that was like maybe based around like a fear or something like that. And now that I'm not afraid of what I was afraid of anymore, it doesn't necessarily make the truth that that fear was based upon untrue or invalid. Right. So it's been, I don't know, some of the conversation internally has been interesting in terms of like basically remembering lessons of the past as I move forward, or to generalize it, basically stuff like that, right? Like I've learned over the years, and hopefully I've grown. I mean, I have learned and I have grown. Hopefully, um, I've extracted the truths that I was meant to or am meant to in this moment moving forward. And so, usually, I feel like there is a sort of almost cohesion. Now that I'm talking about it, I'm like, now that I'm processing it to communicate it in this way, I feel like when I go, when I do these like live, I explain things in a different way. Cause like if I'm talking to my journey buddy or one of my, like, if I'm talking to someone who I have gone through things with before, or like who like know me and know how I whatever, it's like a different kind of processing. But if I'm communicating to someone who, you know, whatever, then it's like different. It's almost like, telling a story like, oh, how weird would it be? Like, let's say you're watching a movie or reading a book, right? And the writer like uses dialogue to introduce characters. And it's like someone's like 20 something, like an adult, and they like meet a friend and like, oh hey, my friend that I've known since I was 5 years old, we went to the same school and blah 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 blah, you know what I mean? Like it'd be weird if like you were the person to have like all of that exposition when like you already know, it's already like shared knowledge, you know what I mean? So anyway, I feel like usually, or more often than not, the case tends to be one of a sort of alignment between the train of thought, reflections, pondering, introflections, and projections, right, into the future of like, okay, like how would I feel about this? Or like, what is it that I'm pursuing? Or like, where do I want to go? What do I want to do? You know what I mean? And I feel like usually there's a certain cohesion where it's like the conclusions that I reach, like things kind of sort of play out in a way that kind of sort of aligns to them. But I feel like now everything is kind of sort of been turned on its head. And the timing is interesting for one. But I feel like it's like it partially has and it partially hasn't. I don't know. It was just basically the timing of everything within the past few days, maybe within the past few days. South Node is in Virgo. Moon is on the South Node. Anyway, it's been interesting. And I'm like, oh, wait. I'm like, wait. So, that 15 minutes aside, I'm gonna timestamp this because why not? I have the power to timestamp as I am live. Intro 00000. Cards. I'll say 15. So we start with Shellos. Now, not every. There was a certain generation in Pokemon where they introduced basically sexual dimorphism, where like the female Pokemon are different than the male Pokemon, right? Now, I feel like it's gotten more extreme. There have been certain lines of Pokemon where it's like females will evolve this way and males will evolve that way or whatever. Anyway, Shellos is one of those Pokemon. Actually, is Shellos one of those Pokemon? I think Shellos is one of those Pokemon. But now I think about it, it may be geographic. Yeah, West C and East C, so it's not sexual dimorphism. This is geographic, which is like makes more sense. But because one is pink and one is blue, sexual dimorphism is something that's kind of sort of like been on my radar. Like it's come up a few times. Um, and so at first I was like, oh my gosh, what could it mean? But then as I actually like started, as the words were coming out of my mouth, I was like, wait, I'm pretty sure it's geographic and not sexual. There's the one pink and one blue. When you see the shinies, it's shiny. That's why I was like, when I was just looking at the card, it looked flat. It has sprinkle water. Oh, girl. I'm gonna have to use my phone to magnify this flavor text. Hello. It's too tiny for me to read. This Pokemon can often be seen along seashores. It's capable of spending a limited amount of time on land. And it's interesting. Well, to me, it's interesting that like sprinkle water is the attack, right? But you don't use water energies to use it. Here we go, I guess. So with the East Sea and the West Sea, what immediately comes to mind are I think they're lakes, or they may be seas or oceans. And I know in the SKT, what comes to mind is the SKT. And it may be on like the Five of Cups, probably the Star. It's like the lake of consciousness. There's like one body of water that symbolizes consciousness. And another, let me pull up this real quick, that symbolizes something different. And so the land in between represents this place or this point. I guess it doesn't necessarily have to be those. It's like there are these two bodies of water. And, or yeah, there are these two bodies of water mentally. And for the sake of simplicity, um, there's a strip of land or like an entire continent. It doesn't matter too much. And these Pokemon can spend a limited amount of time on land, right? And so it feels like even on land, because I wish this pulled up a thing. List all. There we go. Thank you. Super consciousness. So that is so funny because I was looking for that. Spoiler alert, I'm not listening to anything. What I was looking for, I couldn't find. So, and I couldn't think of anything else to put on. But I wanted to wear my headphones. Then I was like, oh, I could have plugged these up to my laptop, tested the mic. Didn't think about it. Key zero is the potential of you as a beneficent immortal. Every tarot card in Spirit Keeper Tarot identifies one such immortal, personifying a key aspect of our cosmos. Key zero, this is from the Book of Maps, which in my particular deck will always be the significator card, is not as much an angel as it is the astral self that also stands in for your higher self or super consciousness. Key zero is the potential of you as a beneficent immortal. So, again, anyway, that's fine. 83 results. So it's like there is enough land where these two different species don't often intermix or intermingle, but it is possible something has happened, and they have, or they have the potential to at the very least. But again, because they can only spend limited time on water, or limited time because they can only spend limited time on land, even when their paths do cross or meet, it's not for long. And I feel like that takes the mystery out of that dimorphism and how it came to be. Like, whenever something is geographic, it feels like it's easier to make sense of because it's like, for example, especially when it comes to like animals or like insects or even plants. More so, like when it comes to animals, it's like it's a dietary thing. It could be a dietary thing, right? Where it's like there's an abundance of like red flour over here, and red flour is a large part of the primary diet of this species. So, because of a chemical in the red flour, they take on a coloration that's like this. And the diet is different, and so the coloration is different in a different place. That's not even sort of including like camouflage, right? And Darwinian sort of survival of the fittest, right? The red birds or the little red animals on the side of the land where there's a lot of like red flowers, they blend in easier. And it's easier for prey to see the green birds. The green ones stand out, so they get picked off, right? And then it's vice versa. The Great Salt Sea of Awareness. Where's the other one? In the star card She pours from one chalice into the great salt sea of awareness, purifying the soul and unconscious, and from the other onto the material plane, healing the physical realm and restoring the body. Okay. Anyway, the thing about basic energy, it's almost, you could say, alchemically neutral. The thing about like basic energy being what's used to do this sprinkle water, especially because these are creatures of water, these are aquatic Pokemon, excuse me, and something about the East Sea versus the West Sea is responsible for the dimorphism that we sort of observe, the differences in them, right? And so it's giving like neutral third party type energy almost. I mean, it could, but it's like if you used water, for example, if you're talking about fish, right? And you have a fish from a lake and a fish from an ocean, and you use like water to sort of be the medium in which they meet and intermingle. Like one is a freshwater fish, the other one is a saltwater fish. If you put the saltwater fish in fresh water, it's going to suffer. If you put the freshwater fish in salt water, it's going to suffer, or at the very least, they'll be uncomfortable. And so it's like because that is the differentiator, it cannot be where they meet. And so maybe it's just an interesting, again, with that like third party energy, like a neutral third party. It's like if there's an advantage one way. Anyway, maybe we're getting too deep into it. And I almost want to say, like, we are, in general, the land that spirits from like different waters meet upon and occupy, right? Everyone has two wolves within them. There's the light of the divine, and then there's like the human ego versus consciousness. Anyway, now I'm pulling from the top face down. Next one is switch. Ooh, girl. I feel like this doesn't work. It's so hilarious. I love that I ended up pulling that card at the bottom of the deck first because if switch was the first card, it would have been like switch what? But because we have this East Waters and like West Waters, because we have these two different variants, you may play any number of item cards during your turn. Switch your active Pokemon with one of your benched Pokemon. It's like the parent trap worked because they're identical. So I guess they're switching places. The whole super consciousness thing is interesting. Or because these are so like open ended, I feel like it's like it could be anything. One thing that comes to mind is evolution, right? And it's almost like the opposite of what happened with dolphins and whales. Like I was seeing quite a few articles, maybe a month ago, that was like whales and dolphins have reached that evolutionary point where they are creatures of water now. It's like they can never go back to the land because basically, um, over time, their vestigial legs, leg bone, like snakes have pelvic bones. I feel like I need to like look it up, but snakes have pelvises, and that is like interesting biblical sort of intersection because it's like why would a snake have a pelvis when it doesn't have legs? Because after the Garden of Eden, the snake was cursed to slither on its belly, and so it had legs before then. Some primitive snakes, like boas and pythons, have a vestigial pelvis, which appears externally as pelvic spurs. These are remnants of the hind legs from their lizard-like ancestors and consist of a small, loose pelvic girdle and femur that do not connect to the spine. Males often have larger spurs, which they use for gripping and for courtship during mating. Right. So it's like over time, because the vestigial structure wasn't being, it just like eventually faded and disappeared. I feel like what's interesting here is there is some like information that we have from antiquity. And there are certain things that have been the way they are for a while. And the thing about a lot of stuff, especially when a significant amount of time has passed, basically the thought that comes to mind is if, like, this, I'm going to say it, I don't necessarily believe it, but it's almost like, the spark of the creator that we all hold within us, right? Like we were created with that. But it's like we were created long ago with that. And it's almost like because if, it's almost as if that spark weren't used, it's almost like it became, the spark itself didn't become vestigial, but something within the human anatomy that anchors that spiritual, energetic presence or force has become vestigial because the spark hasn't been ignited for like generations upon generations upon generations in some way, shape, or form. Again, And so maybe it's the astrology, maybe it's just the turn of, like, there's an energy that's something like the turn of the century, but it's not marked by a century. It's marked by increasing global interconnectedness and other things, right? And so much of what we do and so much of what happens sets sort of like precedents moving forward, sets certain tones, right? We're still freshly into the age of Aquarius. It's like no matter, not no matter, there are so many frameworks to sort of use that place us at the end of one cycle or at the beginning of another one, right? And so it's like we could be in our final evolution. I guess evolution is a very Pokemon thing. Pokemon evolve like Digimon. And it's different for different Pokemon, right? Some Pokemon evolve because of their levels. Some Pokemon evolve based upon the bond they have with their trainer. Some Pokemon evolve in like a certain location or a certain time of day or a certain season, a certain locate. I already said location. Um, or if they're like holding a certain stone, right? The conditions are different for different Pokemon. So, for example, if you have a Pokemon that evolves with like a certain move, a certain item, or in a certain location or time of day, but you try to evolve that Pokemon like you evolve all your other Pokemon and you like grind levels. You're like, my Pikachu is level 100 and it still hasn't evolved. Like all of my other Pokemon have evolved by now. And it's like, well, Pikachu needs a Thunderstone to evolve. So it doesn't matter what level you get your Pikachu to, it'll never evolve unless you give it a Thunderstone. Anyway, it's almost like we are in our final, almost like the final evolutionary phases or stages where it's almost like the spark becomes vestigial, or where it's like we've operated so like largely collectively. Tribalism and self-preservation have like almost always been a thing and almost always will be a thing. So like one's own tribe, self, family, or local community, I would say, isn't a great indicator of like where the heart is, right? And the heart, love, compassion, and ability to extend beyond oneself, it would seem, is a big part of a lot of beliefs about like the divine and stuff like that, right? And so it's like, how long have we, as a human race, sort of done more like nationalistic, tribal, self, individual, familial, more so than truly like heart open, compassion, excuse me, the best of our humanity, right? So it's almost like, again, it's like it's grown dimmer and dimmer and dimmer and it's used less and less. There, I would say it's like there's a boom. So we could like flip it, right? Meaning it's like crossing, building up to crossing an evolutionary sort of step. But in general, This almost like taps into, utilizes certain functions, right? You could say there's the like consciousness and the ego, and they play out in the self. And usually, you could say the ego is more like public facing, social interacting, and the consciousness is more like private, internal, self facing. But they could be switching so that the ego is more internal facing and consciousness is more external facing. And to a certain degree, you could say, from a certain lens, viewpoint, framework, and perspective, you could say that it has been happening because of like external events, um, where in some ways it's like more and more we're kind of sort of like what we truly believe in our ideologies, instead of it being, in some aspects, it may be true or apparent, where it's like that's what we see now, right? And it's like the truth we sort of see now, what we truly feel, what we truly believe. And it's almost like more and more the pressure in like so many different ways. The wave of authenticity is like bringing that truth sort of out, regardless of what that truth is. And it's like that ego that usually is like how we show up or external facing is now on the inside in a way that it always was, but it's almost like because the internal is so external facing, it has like inverted the ego a little bit. And it can be us convincing ourselves of certain things and doubling down in that truth. Next, we have a slugma, which has 80. Shellos had 70. And fire, hot magma. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now burned. Now, Slugma is weak to water. And hot magma actually requires a fire energy, like you would assume it does. So, it's said that in ancient times, when volcanoes were more active, there were many more slugma than there are now. I actually love that it's a fire type because of the spark, right? And literally because the whole conversation of in antiquity, in ancient times, when we were assumingly much more connected to the divine outside of four walls, and like when it was like everywhere rather than in like certain places or at certain times. Again, it's like when the spark within us collectively blaze brighter or more frequently, or where it was more observable back when the basically back when snakes had legs still, right? It was a lot more active. I kind of like wish I had something else, but so far I feel like we're good. Also, I don't know what generation these go up to. So after like Sword and Shield Galar, I think I didn't beat that, and I didn't beat Scarlet and Violet. I don't even remember what that region is called. But if these are the cards we're getting, I'm assuming that it's going to be Pokemon I know. What's also interesting, I'm pretty sure, with these two Pokemon so far, Shellos and Slugma, they're in a two Pokemon evolutionary line. Shellos becomes Gastrodon, Slugma becomes Macargo. Now, what's interesting is basically like Slugma gets a shell and becomes Macargo. So we could say that in an almost hermit crab type energy, it would be like for it would almost be like catching a hermit crab outside of a shell. Like something happened to the shells. Maybe the hermit crabs were doing the hermit crab swap meet where they swap shells. And all of the hermit crabs came out of their shells and they were hanging out doing hermit crab things before the meet started, right? Letting their bodies breathe, doing their exercises, doing whatever, getting their checkup. And then it's like a wave came in and washed away, like washed out all the shells. And it's like they were discovered when they were shellless. And so there's an assumption about the thing because of how we observe it or the conditions in which it was discovered that causes us to make certain assumptions. And then it's like one day it moves into a shell and then it like evolves. But it was like it was always supposed to have a shell. And vestigial structure, it's a term for a phenomenon, or various phenomena. It's like remnants of what an animal or creature used to have. It's remnants that remain today of a feature that the creature used to have. But it's almost like imagine that our basis for dolphins and whales is like today, when those vestigial structures are like so small that you never would have thought they ever had an ancestor that was on the land to begin with. There are some features that it's almost like there are some features that completely fade and they don't necessarily leave a trail. Now, some of it is intentional, right? Like, we don't have to get all the way into it. But, and then it's like, again, like the survival of the fittest thing, right? All of the green butterflies on the red side of the island, maybe they like learn to dye their wings or they go into hiding. And so you think there are no green butterflies on the red side of the island. But it's like there are, but they've adapted in a way to camouflage, to disguise themselves. Yeah, and I guess that was the switch. Now that all the red flowers are being like over harvested or destroyed or whatever, it's like the green is coming out. And it's like, oh, they were green all along. But there's something else here. It's like I almost had it. I feel like I had this train of thought. I tried to communicate it, and then it's like kind of lost it. Next card is Timber, which is a fighting type Pokemon. Best punch. Flip a coin. If tails, this attack does nothing. So there's a 50% chance that the best punch of this is like hit me with your best shot and you still miss. If it fights by swinging a piece of lumber around, it is close to evolving when it can handle heavy lumber without difficulty. Interesting. Conditions for evolution. Again, ADHP. So it's almost like this chance. It's because timber is like always holding that piece of timber, the log. And so if it can't manage the log that it's holding, it's going to be harder to land that punch. And so it's almost like it's not a condition for evolution for like best punch to land more and more and more frequently, but it can be an indicator because again it's almost like it's because the timber can handle that log so easily that the hit rate increases when it can handle heavy lumber without difficulty. So again, thematically, it's almost like if we think of the pyramids that the Egyptians built. Um, if we look at the pyramids that the Egyptians built, and it's almost not to say imagine. I just thought about it like yesterday or the day before. I think when I was walking, because now I have the capacity and the space to think because I'm not listening to an audiobook. My Mercury is in Pisces, a sign that it doesn't like to be in my 12th house, a house it doesn't like to be in, retrograde, also at a Piscean degree. Like those first three things I knew, but it wasn't until yesterday I was like, oh my gosh, my Mercury is also at a Piscean degree. My Mercury can't win for losing. Anyway, so it's almost like we think that like using what do you call them, simple machines, I think they're called simple machines, like pulleys and levers and inclined planes, and it's like it had to be aliens because it's like these things are so massive, and it's almost like within the context of this, within the context of timber and its evolution, because again, for not for some reason, But when it comes to like spiritual growth, development, evolution, it seems like antiquity is the template. Like there was this time that we're like trying to get back to, right? And it doesn't even necessarily have to be Atlantean. Or like there were these things that happened so long ago that are what we aspire to today. And it's again, it's not, there's no judgment on the validity of that. It's just the, for the purpose of this, assume, right? Back then, like the Egyptians were more evolved. So we see these huge stones that they would have like had to move to construct this. And we use our strength today as our basis to go, how would they have moved it then? And then it's like we theory craft how it could have like happened. But it's almost like, well, back then they were that strong, right? They were, now this is a three line. I'm pretty sure this is a three line evolution. Or is it another two? I don't think it's, no, it is a three line. And I think Conkeldurr is the final evolution. But it's like, yeah, it is a three-part evolution. Girder is the second one, Conkeldurr is the third one. It's like, um, let me see if I can't like zoom this in. It's like the ancient Egyptians were Conkeldurrs all the way on the right with the two hunks of concrete, and we're like timbers struggling with like a log. Meanwhile, they were like chucking hunks of concrete like they were pebbles type energy. So now, of course, like every card gives this more and more context, right? So it feels like the switch is personal, almost low key giving Semyaza Angel of Pride. And Semyaza, I'm pretty sure the energy of Semyaza Angel of Pride like came out very recently, like the last live or between the last one and the last like two or three, right? But it's like in this period where, on one hand, an observable collapse is happening. There's a simultaneous resurgence, and ultimately, it's going to be, will the resurgence win out over the collapse, and will things begin to like build rather than everything just like crashing and falling apart and caving in, right? So that's it with the collapse and the resurgence, right? And again, the benefit of having the ego on the internal is when things go back to, it's like it gives us a viewpoint that we may not have necessarily had before. Because when the truth was on the inside and the mask was outside, it's almost like it's easier to go, well, like, I know, like, this is how I present. I know this is what things look like, but that's the mask. And I know my truth versus the mask. And I can comfort myself in knowing that, like, this is, who I am without the mask. And the mask is just something that I have to wear to like blend in or fit in or whatever. But with the increase in authenticity on many, many, many sides, regardless of what that authenticity looks like It is true to the person and to the people. It's like now with the truth on the outside, it's almost an opportunity to really observe the mask. Or you could just say it's a break from wearing the mask. And so when things sort of like resettle, because it's almost giving me like there's a lot of heat right now, like things are really hot. And because things are really hot, like reaction rates are like way up. Like it's easier for things to like pop off and happen because everything is hot. But when things cool back down, it's like it's going to settle into a certain state or configuration. And it's like when that settling is happening, or as we're projecting further out and we're looking like less immediate future, if we even have the space and opportunity to, it's like, okay, well, like when things settle down and everything that's outside goes back inside, it's an opportunity to be like, well, what do I want to show and reflect outside to me what I want to align with outside? Anyway, this is, it's almost like if Timber had a pre. Let me stop. We don't have to go all the way there. Timber is the baby, Conkeldurr is the two hunks of concrete, right? And then Girder is the one in between. Stage one, two, and three. Keep it easy. So the more that the best punch lands, it's an indicator. Again, it's not the condition, but because the condition of being close to evolution is can't easily handle heavy burdens, heavy logs, right? Because a heavy log is nothing compared to light concrete type energy, you know what I mean? And sometimes, anyway, I think Girder has a steel beam and then Conkeldurr has the concrete. Oh, well, that would make sense. Yeah, it does. Timber has timber. Girder has like the steel beam, which is like a girder or something. And then Conkeldurr has like concrete. It gets like denser and heavier. And it's interesting that it goes from well, maybe not. For some reason, a steel beam seems more industrial to me than concrete, but I'm sure that isn't the case, right? Because would you have like steel beams and then like put plaster around the steel beam? Like, wouldn't there be some kind of concrete if you're using like steel beams? Anyway, let me not get too lost in it. And there's, I guess, like the shell is the home, but it's a mobile home, right? And again, because going from slug mud to mud cargo, where it basically goes from a slug to a snail, it gets a shell. From a, it's like, again, with the thing of like a time where the divine was everywhere and you can commune with the divine anywhere and everywhere. And it wasn't just a like, this is a building that I go to, or this is a time, or this is an altar, or this is a thing, where it's like it didn't have to be designated. And because it wasn't designated, we didn't feel so separated, right? It wasn't like, oh, I haven't been to like church in a week, or I haven't like communed with the ancestors in a week, or I haven't done whatever for a week. I'm feeling so disconnected. It was like this 24/7, you like just so immersed that there was no. And I wonder if that is a correlation and how big of a, like a population, sort of sample size, collective, group, tribe, whatever, there has to be. I wonder if we feel as connected to spirit generally as we do to one another. Now, on a certain hand, we're all made in the image of the Creator. We are all created by the divine. It would make sense because we're all divine creation that if we feel separate and isolated from one another, that we would feel separate and isolated from the divine. But it's almost like, in a lot of ways, outside of what appears to be modern, more Western, whatever, in a lot of ways, I feel like there are quite a few cultures where that connectedness to the divine had a direct interconnectedness with one another and the environment around us type feeling too. The McCargo was where like anywhere could be a home because their home is on their back. They have that shell. This kind of sort of did come up in those cards. I don't even remember anymore. I remember there were multiple cards, and there was one. Was it the threshold? And it was like where it was the whole metaphor of like there's like a spiritual, not spiritual evolution. I mean, kind of, sort of, in a way, it was. Um, but it was like at a certain point in the evolution of these beings, like they don't need to breathe anymore. And so the fact that past a certain threshold, there's no more oxygen, it's like the environment itself is a test, right? So in scorpionic energy, not necessarily Scorpio season, necessarily, hopefully, necessarily. In scorpionic energy, there's not a lot of light. If you look at like Scorpio fixed water, deep sea type energy, there's not a lot of light there. And so, if you need light to photosynthesize, or if you need light to survive, it's like the energy itself is, I want to say, anathema. The energy itself is a challenge because of those dependencies. And it's like the switch is, it's like the slug that finds the shell, that finds its home. It's the timber that can so easily handle heavy wood that it moves on to steel beams. And it's almost like if the handling of steel beams is what triggers the evolution. It's not necessarily the lightness of the timber. So it's almost like you have to step into the next thing to trigger that evolution, right? Like, how long did the ancestors of early mammals, like, how many generations were they on land before they didn't have like gills and fins and stuff anymore, where they actually had like legs and lungs to breathe in the air, right? Like, how long until Shellos goes from a limited time on land to being able to comfortably spend as much time as it desires on land, let alone being completely independent or primarily. I'm going to do two things. First, hey Google, flip a coin. Heads, it hits. It hits. Sorry. Hey Google, pick a random number between 0 and 100. Maybe. Hello. Hey Google, pick a random number between 0 and 100. 55. And we did get heads. 55 is 11 out of 20. That was like I mean, it'd be different for different people. But I guess largely collectively, if we're largely collectively out of 55, that is a majority, right? The majority of the best punches are landing, which means conditions are favorable for evolution. Now, we could do a series of heads and tails, but 55 gives us 55%. So we can just not do that. And there's something about this thought of like when the blue crosses the threat, it's like when the slug finds the shell, when the lumber is light. Let's just pull another one. This is 4 cards. We got 6 more, and I need to go to bed at some point. Joltic. We're getting a card like every element, which we don't have a repeat type yet. We got water type, fire type, fighting type, now an electric type. Jolting charge. Okay. Search your deck for up to 2 basic energy cards and up to two. Oh, wait. 2 basic lightning energies and 2 basic. Oops. I saw green. Click the wrong one. Is that grass? Looks like a leaf. Or is that bug? I mean, I'm assuming it's bug. You get up to 2 basic energy cards of 2 types and attach them to your Pokemon in any way you like. Then shuffle your deck. The flavor text says since it can't generate its own electricity, it sticks onto large bodied Pokemon and absorbs static electricity. You got an electric type that can absorb its own electricity, and it only has 30 HP. This is like Thunder Spider. But for it's almost like for the modern age, this is very effective. Also, like there's a fire Pokemon that's weak to water. There's this water Pokemon that's weak to electric. You see the weaknesses down there? And then there's this electric Pokemon that's weak to fighting. And the fighting Pokemon is weak to psychic. And we don't have. Let me stop. There's no psychic type on the table. I mean, to be fair, we're only 4 cards in. 5 cards now. 4 Pokemon though. It feels like with modern energy, modern day and time, static is giving me friction. And there's a lot of friction like everywhere. Like it's really easy to build up static charges. So it's almost like this flip. And again, it's like that switch energy of, again, it's like because of all of the red flora that no longer is, the red fauna don't have it as easy as they used to. And the green fauna can like flourish now that they're not like the odd ones out. So it's almost like in the time of Conkeldurrs and Magcargos, when the timbers were lugging around concrete, chucking them like pebbles, chucking chunks like pebbles, and all of the slugs had shells and were snails. It may have been harder for Joltix because there wasn't as much friction. And because there wasn't as much friction, there wasn't as much like static electricity for these little, for the bugs, electric bugs, to, it's like to survive long enough to learn how to generate their own electricity. But now that, you know, conquildors are beyond legend and there is no slug that is safe, they're like shells are commodities. Because there's so much friction, it's easier. But it's almost like you didn't have, there was something missing in the time before, too. Missing may be an overstatement, but in terms of like having a heyday or a glory day in the past that one seeks to reclaim, it's like keep that in mind in terms of like, it's almost like it's not going to be a one for one or a one to one experience because things are different, right? We can set up our own pulleys and run our own experiments. We can test our hypotheses to see if we can make what they used to make back in antiquity with like the information and the technology that we know that they had or we assume they had. But again, that's like a modern recreation based upon modern understanding. And it's not to say that that's how things were actually done. Basically, if we were to just go back in time, all of the Joltics would die. It, Joltics are a vital part of, maybe there weren't any that like survived long enough to learn to generate their own friction. And so that's why like the dinosaurs had to go. And that's why Mega Flora had to go. So that the little guys could evolve and have a chance. It's also interesting that this is the only Pokemon on the table that doesn't have an attack, but it can fuel other attacks. Interestingly, the only Pokemon on the table so far that Joltik doesn't help at all is the one that it is weak to. Well, I guess I take that back. Because I read that as like the basic energy and not the leaf energy. So sorry. But again, because that's how I saw it. But that makes sense. And maybe that is a truer test of heart, almost like the belief or attitude that you don't judge someone's like decency, public decency. You don't judge someone's public decency based upon how they interact with people that have more power and authority than they do. It's like you can get a different view of someone's public decency by the way that they treat people who have like nothing to give them or can benefit them in no way. Not this necessarily, because it doesn't, but yeah, that's the point. Like, it doesn't give to anything that it considers a threat. And when you're in survival mode, it makes sense. But if we claim to be, or aim to be, if we aim to be like out of surviving and into thriving, a Joltic that's thriving doesn't care how many timbers or even conquildors there are. You could say an evolved Joltic. An evolved Joltic would be able to generate its own electricity. It wouldn't have to rely. Oh, yeah, that fits. Excuse me. It wouldn't have to rely upon static forces to siphon electricity off of, right? And so, like with the spark, and maybe that's why it was like easier for it to be like anywhere and everywhere rather than, because it's like there was a flame that was active, right? And so it's like in a world pre street lights and electric light, synthetic light, you weren't, quote unquote, in the metaphor, you weren't as afraid to go out into the dark because your internal light was bright enough for you to see. But when that light got dimmer and dimmer and dimmer internally, that's when like the dark got so scary. Another condition for evolution generates own electricity. Next, we have Weavile, which is Weavile is not a water type. I thought Weavile was like ice and steel. Maybe they don't. They have to have ice Pokemon cards, right? Maybe they don't. Girl, what type are you? Or is it like dark? It's dark and ice. Oh, speaking of the dark, then this dark type Pokemon came up. And also ice. It's, yeah. We have our first evolved Pokemon. Love that. You can see its pre evolution up there, Sneasel. That's Sneasel, right? Now I'm like, who are the Pokemon? Because, no. Yeah, that is Sneasel. I said Sneasel and I was thinking Smeargle. So it has two attacks. It has Slash and Hail Claw. This Slash could take out Joltik in one hit. I'll do the flavor text first. Well, Hail Claw. So for one water energy, you can slash for 40 damage. For two water energies, you can use Hail Claw. And that is discard all energy from this Pokemon. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now paralyzed. How do you paralyze with like hail? Like frozen, maybe. Maybe like paralyzed with fear. But like when people say it was like hail the size of golf balls and stuff like that, those things like they do damage. So, so they travel in groups of four or five, leaving signs for one another on trees and rocks. They bring down their prey with coordinated attacks. So not only are they evolved, they're also coordinated. 100 HP. I almost want to say this starts a new line, but how I have the card set on the table, this actually bridges the gap. I put a gap between Shellos and Switch because Shellos came from the bottom of the deck because I already saw it. See, there's like discard all energy attached to that Pokemon, and it paralyzes the opponent's active Pokemon. Discarding all energy, it's like a showing of all energy. It's evolved, right? And it's almost giving me that, which was a theme in the past few readings, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe. Um, that was like, excuse me, sorry. That was like the electron and phosphorescence came to my mind, but the photons, right? An atom absorbs energy as a photon, light. Um, the electrons get excited, they lose that energy, and when they like lose that energy, it's emitted as like a light photon, right? So it's like, in order, like if someone, it's like when the angels were like, be not afraid, right? Um, it's like someone shows up in their full brilliance and it paralyzes. Now, it doesn't even necessarily have to be a paralysis due to like fear. It can be a paralysis due to like awe, right? It's like when people get so starstruck or so whatever that like they kind of get like that deer in headlights, like they can't even like speak. They're just like, and it's interesting. Not really. From a certain viewpoint, it's interesting that it's another water type that does this. This is why it's on the Switch, because this evolution is like the blue that crosses over into the pink or vice versa. And again, paralysis is a status effect that is usually associated with electric types, right? But this is a water type and a water move, ice move, technically, that can inflict paralysis. And they appear in fours and fives. They leave signs for one another and they coordinate. Next is Abra. We got our psychic type. Who's weak to psychic? Conkeldurr or Timber. Now Timber's weakness is on the table. There's the psychic type. Womp womp. Let's see. Weak to psychic. There's the psychic. Now Abras in the game are very timid. It's like if you don't look them, if you don't prevent them from running away or get lucky with just throwing a Pokeball, they will teleport. Once during your turn, if this Pokemon is in the active spot, you may shuffle it and all attached cards into your deck. It has Beam for 1 psychic energy that deals 10 damage, and it has 40 HP. This Pokemon uses its psychic powers while it sleeps. The contents of Abra's dreams affect the powers that the Pokemon wields. Interesting. Dreams affecting reality. This Abra is interesting. The energy of the teleport is interesting here after Weavile. Maybe it's the paralysis. Maybe paralysis is used as a measure. Could be. Well, especially now. I was just watching Yu-Gi-Oh! Girl. Of all things, Yu-Gi-Oh! Pokemon, what's happening? And it was like a movie. And they were talking about fear. What fear and like hatred can do to people, how it manifests as like aggression, and then things just happen and the world falls into darkness. It's almost like I feel it's almost like fear. I don't necessarily want to say it's like fear responses are different now than they used to be. You could say it's almost like a, you know, you only can tell a certain number of people be not afraid so many times before you just like stop showing up. You know what I mean? You know, it's like every time you tried to talk to somebody, they started screaming hysterically and crying, and then like ran away. Eventually, you might just avoid them, unless anyway. Again, it's like with that teleport and that energy of like the conditions today are what allows Joltik to thrive, to survive long enough to learn to generate their own electricity. It's almost like there is some part in the ecology that Joltik plays, but because everything was so frictionless and smooth before, Joltik could never reach maturation to create whatever it is that they create. And it's like that's something that was sorely missing in antiquity. Not necessarily the cause of collapse or whatever, but it was missing. Now we see like all of the beautiful things that Joltics can do. But I wonder again in that paralysis trial, because you would think it would be the electric type that inflicts paralysis, but it was the water type. I feel like there are so many layers to this. Like I can mentally like see a few, but it's already an hour and a half, and I gotta get to bed. Plus, you know what? I see like I'll do a reading or whatever, or like listen to something, and I'll see so many like confirmations after, or like so many like different whatever. And then one day recently, I was like, I have to trust that like just as I get confirmations that lead me down certain like lines of thinking or leads me to notice certain things, and then like that's how it resonates for me. I have to trust, I don't have to, but I am choosing to trust that the same happens for anyone else who comes upon any of this, right? They'll come upon something if the that just gives them further context and clarification. that plays to their discernment. But anyway, it's like all of the weavals disappeared, right? The snails don't have shells anymore, they've become slugs. And timbers rarely evolve anymore. So it's almost like they're trying to do with wood what used to be done with like steel and concrete. But yeah, we're learning to, just like the slug and the shell, learning to generate our own, excuse me, learning to generate our own charge. So we're not as dependent upon external forces, right? It's almost like our light in certain modernization attempts, our light has been replaced. If our light, if our lights were candles, they've been replaced with light bulbs. But because we can't generate our own electricity, or because our electromagnetic fields and radiation isn't strong enough or stable enough to power our light bulbs, we rely upon external sources of power. And it's not always bad. We are where we are who we are, and what's for us is for us. But this would be like the change. So, on one hand, it's us learning to generate enough power internally to keep our light on. But on the other hand, it's almost like there may be an experience where we learn about, like, I want to say like a capacitor or something that keeps our light bulb from being overcharged. Basically, where it, like, there's so much current flowing through that it just like explodes, right? Because that explosion paralysis is what happens when Weavile shows up in all of its like glory, and then it disappears, right? Sometimes you get too close to something and you're like, oop, a little bit too much for me. Or it doesn't even have to be like meeting an external energy itself. It could also be coming upon other things that need juice. And it's not other things that need power in a like narcissistic energy vampire type of way. But in a way, it's almost like um, being recommended. Like when someone becomes so luminous, it's like you get recommended to other people. It's like people in need spot you, and you can help in whatever ways resonate, right? And if there are no ways that resonate, that are resonant, that proceed appropriately. But it's like it could be like you being expected to provide the power for another light bulb. And it doesn't even have to be like, it could be like auxiliary power, right? Like someone needs like a quick charge or whatever, right? It's not someone like tapping into your grid or like plugging up their appliances into your sockets. It could be like that contactless, you know, not contactless. It could be like the wireless charging. Like contact is kind of required. If there is contactless charging, girl, the future. Like if you just like stand in this area, your phone will charge itself. You don't have to plug it in or set it on top of anything. It receives power through the Wi-Fi. Which I feel like if there was like a frequency modulator, I know this isn't how it works. I assume this isn't how it works in real life. But if there were like a frequency modulator or some kind of like signal that you could put out, it's almost like if you had electrons or something and would cause them to like switch. And it's like in this movement, it would like generate. I mean, I guess it would have to be a lot of electrons or something, girl. Like I said, it's just like there's a frequency that causes something in the battery to do like that. And it generates power, and that's how it like charges. Then it's like stored. Anyway, it's dreams. Abra, going back to Abra. It's dreams. So maybe that's part of the thing too. This Pokemon uses its psychic powers while it sleeps. The contents of Abra's dreams affect the powers that the Pokemon wields. So it's almost like you will be told, which is so hilarious because I was like, I'm pretty sure I think in the last live I was talking about in the past two or three. I was talking about a dream I had where I was given a task. I was going to say a mission and a task, and then it came out as mask. I was given a task and like no instruction. I intuitively knew what I was supposed to do, but because I didn't receive clear instruction, I was just like, I'm not going to do it. It's almost like you'll be told in some way dream, download, channeling, intuition, discernment, however you commune with the divine. If it's like when and if like there's a contactless charging situation, or or because of the potential for paralysis, like dreams are the medium, right? So like rather than approaching people in person and going like, be not afraid, they approach in dreams because in dreams we're more pliable, or in like prayer or meditation, because in those spaces where it's almost like a dream, our minds are more open. Cool. One more to finish this, bro. And we have, I don't know, 110 HP. Also weak to fighting. It has beckon, put a supporter card from your discard pile into your hand. And it has Zen Headbutt. I kind of love the energy of Zen Headbutt. It's all basic. It's a normal type. What I love about Zen Headbutt is that like, and this is following Abra, which is a psychic type. And Zen gives like psychic energy because it's like mental. Zen Headbutt may actually be a psychic type move. Girl, 1 second. This man. Um, I'm pretty sure it's a psychic type move in the game. What I love about Zen Headbutt is like you wouldn't assume that like a Zen master, because they're so Zen, would like headbutt anybody because it's like violent. It is a psychic type move in the game. It has a 90% accuracy. If you're curious, it can miss. Oh, I didn't read the flavor text. It's also interesting because, like, again, Abra, it does have that beam attack, but its proclivity is to flee. Audino's sense of hearing is superb. Not even a pebble rolling along over a mile away will escape Audino's ears. There's something with Abra, dreams and psychic powers. There's something about like extrasensory phenomena. Extrasensory being like not physical. So I would assume my first like low hanging fruit thought was like not necessarily something being so loud psychically that you can hear it like whispering physically. It was like a desensitized psychicness level of connection to the point where like things physically had to be um observable, but it's almost reading more like because so much, if not everything, the upper majority of things and the physical are preceded spiritually. Because that is the case, it's like there's a tell. So, like a tell, like there are signs that things are going to shift or move physically before they move. And with like Adeno's keen sense of hearing, Adeno can hear it before it happens. It's almost like, when you start up a car, right? Or if there's like machinery that starts up, like a locomotive, it's the I was gonna make the train noise. It's the chugga 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 before it starts to like speed up. Before it's almost like the same is true for you could say everything. There's like some kind of noise that it makes before it like starts to move. And with Anano's keen sense of hearing, it can tap into that. Like a physical sense that is so keen it borders on the supernatural. Or it actually crosses the border. You could also see because of, say, Abra sees, Adonai hears. Because of Abra's dream, it sees. Again, both of these after Weavile, which is the evolved Pokemon. Also, Weavile appear in groups of 4 and 5. They leave signs for each other and they coordinate. It's like Abra could see the signs in dreams. Adeno could hear the signs in waking, in like its waking world reality life. And because of Timber and also Joltik, these are on the so this line starts with Timber and it's gonna end with Adeno. Weavile is the middle of these 5 cards, right? So when timber, when timber's best punch starts to hit more and more often, it's an indicator that it is close to evolving. When Joltik begins to generate its own charge rather than purely relying on static forces, it's close to evolving. And it's almost like there's almost an energy of like things sort of like being held at the starting line or finishing line. It's like timber is waiting to pick up the steel beam. Joltik is waiting to charge a light bulb, or Joltik is waiting to be the source of electricity rather than it relying on another thing to generate electricity. Or maybe not. Because at first I was going to say like they're waiting to cross that finish line, waiting to make that evolutionary leap for, or like waiting until the thing starts. But maybe it's almost like the other way around. Because again, these are five cards that said they roam in groups of 4 and 5. One is listening, one is watching, one is already evolved, but is standing back so it doesn't paralyze unnecessarily. And then the other two are doing their thing and about to cross those evolutionary lines. There's only 2 cards left. And these two will be their own row. We have Yanma, which is a grass type, so that is grass energy. It has swoop across and cutting wind, and it's weak to fire. Fire is on the table. On the table. So, swoop attack. This attack does 10 damage to each of your opponent's Pokemon. Do not apply weakness and resistance for benched Pokemon. So it does 10 damage regardless of weaknesses or whatever. Cutting Wind deals 70 damage. That Cutting Wind, it takes the chunk out of everybody. And it can 1, 2, 3 Pokemon go down, 2 on their last leg, and the last 2 with a fair amount of HP. So, if it flaps its wings really fast, it can generate shock waves that will shatter windows in the area. Do all of these say retreat? No. Yanma is the only one that has retreat. It has retreat right here. I guess it has a retreat quotes. See that retreat? You probably can't see it, but it says retreat. Yanma is another 2-line evolution. Yanma evolves into Yanmega. I want to read like a Pokédex entry for some reason. It's the clear wing Pokemon. Obviously, it's a Dragonfly. It evolves. So this is a Pokemon that evolves when it knows a certain move. It evolves into Yanmega when leveled up while knowing ancient power. Biology, game data, Pokédex entry. Oh, it's the gold version entry. If it flaps its wings really fast, it can generate shock waves that will shatter windows in the area. Its large eyes can scan 360 degrees. It looks in all directions to seek out insects as its prey. It can see in all directions without moving its big eyes, helping it spot attackers and food right away. If it flaps its wings really fast, oh, then it puts all of them together. It's capable of seeing 360 degrees without having to move its eyes. It's a great flyer that is adept at making sudden stops and turning midair. This Pokemon uses its flying ability to quickly chase down targeted prey. It can see 360 degrees without moving its eyes. Yeah. And the rest of them are iterations of that. It can see 360 degrees without moving its head or without moving its eyes. And if it flaps its wings really fast, it can generate shock waves. It can hover in one spot by flapping its wings at high speed. And that's basically it. For some reason, I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking of something else. Oh, it's a red insect. LOL. It's a red insect with a green face. It's a red insect with a green face. And we were talking about green insects that had gone into hiding. Cool. What's the last one? The last one is Gravity Mountain. Each stage, two Pokemon in play, both yours and your opponent's, gets minus 30 HP. The only stage two Pokemon on the field, the only evolved Pokemon. I don't know, doesn't evolve. The only stage two Pokemon on the field is Weavile. And it's so interesting that this is Gravity Mountain, LOL, because of said dream that I was talking about before. I was like, I felt that. I woke up from that dream like, yeah, I felt that. I felt that test. And I wasn't even like necessarily too bothered because I was like, if you're not going to tell me, then how am I expected to do it? And it's like, girl, you know. You may play only one stadium card during your turn, put it next to the active spot, and discard it if another stadium comes into play. A stadium with the same name can't be played. What's interesting about Gravity Mountain, so this combination, and again, for Yanma to evolve, it has to level up while knowing the move Ancient Power. So if Yanma learns Ancient Power at level 100, it'll never evolve because 100 is the max level. Unless in recent games there's a way to like reduce the level, it'll never evolve because it has to gain a level knowing that move. So it's not almost with like the timber in that energy of like it has to pick up the next thing and start to develop um, the ability to wield it, and like that's what triggers the evolution. It's like because sometimes comfort zones and other reasons we will be big fish and small ponds, and it's like the evolution isn't triggered until the big fish goes into a larger body of water. But sometimes it's almost like we feel it when we're in the big fish in the small pond. But again, that's like that's at the end of one phase. Evolution, almost like a threshold, like signals the beginning of another. Yanma beats its wings furiously enough to not be affected by Gravity Mountain, to fly freely and Gravity Mountain, in fact. So there's something about that ancient power that is not affected by gravity on Earth. And don't know if it was teleported away, whisked away, whatever. So it's almost like there are still conquilders and med cargos. Like there's a Weavile here, and Weavile is a stage 2 Pokemon. It's almost like time hasn't dulled. It's like time hasn't dulled anything that had already attained or achieved whatever. She's giving like undercover, not undercover, like secret powerhouse type energy, right? Like, uh, pick a show or a movie or a book where there are like superhumans, aliases, secret identities, superhumans that like pretend to be like normal. But meanwhile, it's like they're as powerful as they've always been. But, because of what paralyzing fear can do, or because of what people do when they're afraid, that information is like kept hidden. I don't know. Anyway, interesting. There were interesting things that sort of came up. Well, we gotta go. This is 2 hours of my life that I don't regret. I hope y'all have an amazing whatever whenever you see this. I hope you're acting in alignment to make all that you wish to experience your reality. I hope that whatever you need along your path, try in any way you find. And it's almost like when it's time, it's like you will know. There will be signs that something is shifting or has shifted. It's almost like on a certain hand, there will be signs that something has shifted or is shifting. But on the other hand, it's like you could be a part of the thing that details the shift, right? Like you're learning to generate your own electricity and power your whatever constructs yourself rather than like relying on purely external energy. And even if that's like a collaboration between you and the divine, it's like giving the energy of like you and your personal relationship with the divine. It's not necessarily you and the divine working through some other like hierophant or medium, but a medium as like a person in between. Switch. So switch is like it's time to make that evolutionary change. But again, that was the thing. That was the West Sea going to the east or the east going to the west, crossing that land bridge. So it's more than just a meeting. Maybe it starts with a meeting. Maybe you came across the Weavile, and maybe it was a paralyzing fear at one point, but now it's like, oh, like I know it's possible. Or like now it's like confirmation, or like it encourages you to do whatever, right? So cool. I don't know. All right, I'll catch y'all later. Bye. That was fun. I don't regret that at all.